Jarvis, you there?
At your service, sir.
Today, Iron Man is essentially a mascot for the superhero genre. For the average person, Tony Stark and Robert Downey Jr. are one and the same. When Tony Stark died in Endgame, it wasn't just another character had died. It was like the entire party had come to an end. 15 years of buildup had just vanished in an instant. But let's go back a bit. Take it back to before 2008. Iron Man was a B-list character at most. He wasn't just an ordinary unknown character. Comics fans knew him. Kids who watch cartoons probably had seen him pop up once or twice, and he had been there since the Avengers began in 1963. Still, let's face it, nobody's putting Tony Stark up with Spider-Man, Batman, or Superman. He was the one you saw in a group picture and you think, oh yeah, that's him, I know that guy. People respected him, but was he a character anyone really loved? No, not really. But Marvel was about to give everyone a reason to. Marvel grabbed a nobody with a mask and turned him into the main event. The guy playing him got so famous that he basically swallowed the entire franchise. Iron Man changed everything for Marvel. Superhero films can now be something different. Shared universe was no longer just a goofy term among fans. It became the plan for Hollywood. All 50 years of comic book baggage was finally brought into the open, one film at a time. Marvel gambled everything on this one character, and it worked way better than they ever planned.
Tony Stark makes you feel he's a cool exec with a heart of steel.
By 2008, Tony Stark had almost 50 years of comic history behind him. He first appeared in Tales of Suspense in 1963 as a Cold War arms dealer who was captured, built a suit of armor so he could survive, and then changed his mind about the kind of things he's been selling and who he'd been selling them to. He was also a founding member of the Avengers. In the late 70s, he went through an alcoholism storyline known as Demon in the Bottle, which is still regarded as one of the most mature stories ever told in mainstream superhero comics. He had popped up in cartoons and video games as well. So yeah, anyone who had followed comics even a little would have regarded him as far from irrelevant, but still, Iron Man was not Marvel's most popular character, nowhere close. Spider-Man was their Mickey Mouse, X-Men were their moneymakers, and he was nowhere near the same tier as characters like the Hulk. Hell, before 2008, more people probably knew who Uncle Ben was than Tony Stark. Iron Man wasn't unknown, he was just there. He was an Avenger, a guy you knew, a guy you were kind of familiar with, but he was almost never the reason you showed up. And that's exactly why Marvel still had him. By mid-2000s, Marvel was in a completely different place than it is now. Throughout the 90s, it was basically bankrupt, and the characters who were still worth anything and could generate profit had been licensed to other studios. Spider-Man was owned by Sony, while X-Men and the Fantastic Four were owned by Fox. Marvel no longer controlled their most important characters, and the films based on them were bringing wealth to other studios, while Marvel only received a licensing fee. At the time, it was completely insane for Marvel to take out a $500 million loan from Merrill Lynch in order to finance their films themselves. They basically mortgaged the film rights to their remaining characters. So if these movies were a failure, that means Marvel could have lost the rights to their remaining characters like Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man to the bank. So to be clear, Marvel wasn't just rolling the dice for fun. If Iron Man tanked, everything was gone, and they put all their hope into a character that nobody gave a damn about. That's when Robert Downey Jr. appears. Marvel took an even greater risk there. In 2008, RDJ wasn't the sure thing he is now. He was a talented actor, sure, but he had a criminal record and a bad reputation. This caused a lot of studios to pause, and essentially he was blacklisted for a while. But this is where everything flips. Fabio takes Downey to a screen test, and suddenly the suits can't look away. Downey just walks in and basically is Tony Stark's. The Marvel higher-ups still not buying it. They're convinced Downey's baggage might still tank the whole movie. As the story goes, Favreau basically camps out at Marvel, running scenes and shoving audition tapes in their face until they cave. He went so far as to say, fine, if Downey screws up, I'll cover the insurance myself. That's how convinced he was that Downey was the only guy who could pull off Tony Stark. And honestly, Marvel was in no shape to gamble on a disaster, but they went along with it anyway. They just decided to trust Favreau and hope for the best.
And I think by casting Robert Downey Jr. and, the comic book fans say, great, oh my God, that's perfectly Tony Stark. What's great for people who aren't fans is they see Robert, they bring a set of expectations to the movie based on who he is and what his whole history has been and his level of talent, his sense of humor, and they then immediately understand what Tony Stark is about.
Marvel needed Iron Man to succeed, and the person no one else wanted ended up being the only one capable of making it happen.
What's going on here?
Let's face it, this is not the worst thing you've caught me doing.
This is where everything gets locked in. The tone, the jokes, the money, it's all born right here. Look at what Iron Man actually shows about Tony in the first act, before his suit even appears. He's a celebrity genius arms dealer who signs autographs at his own weapons demos. Doesn't really care where his missiles end up after they're sold. He's funny, but it's less comic relief and more like a defense mechanism. He's always making jokes in order to avoid being sincere. Pepper Potts runs his actual life because he can't do it himself. And Rhodey quietly cleans up after him because someone has to. Obadiah Stane is his mentor, and he's one of the closest people to him, but he also has a knife ready, so there's that. He then gets captured in Afghanistan. He survives by making a suit in a cave out of scrap metal, and he sees someone die in order to save him. And when he returns home, he's a totally different person. That's all Tony. He's arrogant, brilliant, emotionally evasive, and completely dependent on other people to keep his life from falling apart. Then the cave happens and strips all that away and forces him to decide what any of it's actually for. Tony goes through so much and it changes him every time. Let's pause here real quick and talk about RDJ. Saying he's good at it doesn't even get close. The real thing is what RDJ does to Tony Stark. Comic book Tony is smart and has issues, sure, but movie Tony? He's smart, he's a mess, and he's funny in this twitchy, rapid-fire way that feels like he's making it up as he goes. And I feel like sometimes he probably is. Half the best lines are apparently him just riffing on set. That whole thing about using jokes as a shield, dodging real feelings, then suddenly dropping the act for a second, ends up being so much the character that it essentially wiped out 50 years of the comic. Ask 100 people who Iron Man is, and they're all gonna describe Robert Downey Jr., not some guy from the 1963 comic. It's not just good actor or good character, it's something weirder. Tony Stark essentially becomes the prototype for a protagonist in the MCU. The guy has sharp jokes, zero interest in being serious, and always drops a punchline right when you're expecting something heavy. You can actually see the actor bleeding through the character, not hiding behind it. And if you keep watching, you'll notice that this pops up in half the MCU characters over the decades. Is that good? Is it bad? Well, critics can't really shut up about it. And to be fair to them, what started as a Tony Stark thing, cracking jokes in the middle of chaos, suddenly became everyone's thing. It got out of hand fast. Suddenly, every Marvel movie is just people riffing. Even DC caught the bug. Shazam is basically just their version of a Marvel character. And even a character like Batman, of all people, can't resist tossing in a joke or two, even when it undercuts the whole scene. Then you get movies like Fast and Furious, Jumanji. All the blockbusters basically jumped in on a bandwagon. Big action means bigger one-liners. This was the Iron Man formula. Improv, wink at the camera, repeat. This became the blueprint for everyone. And we're still dealing with this even now. But it all started right here. And then there's that ending, where Tony's given this cover story where Iron Man is actually Tony Stark's bodyguard, and he's told to repeat it in front of cameras. And he looks at the room and at the easy lie that's right there for him to tell. But instead, he says this.
I am Iron Man.
And with that, the secret identity is now gone, right from the start. One of the oldest roles of superheroes is now gone just because Tony wants it to be that way. And as a result, the MCU has his first true star, Tony Stark, not Iron Man. And it's at this point that that B-grade character grows into something bigger than anyone had planned.
I'm sorry, I don't want to get off on the wrong foot. Do I look at the patch or the eye?
Okay, now the job is a lot different. Iron Man 1 had one task: make Iron Man work as a character and as a film. Iron Man 2 gets stuck with the much less fun job, making the MCU itself work. This is the movie where the Marvel Cinematic Universe starts gluing itself onto Tony, and honestly, it kinda gets in the way. Nick Fury is actually in the movie this time and not just the post-credit scenes. Natasha shows up pretending to be someone named Natalie, and nobody calls her Black Widow yet because apparently we're not there yet. S.H.I.E.L.D. is suddenly in every scene, even when they have no reason to be. And Rhodey, oh, hold on, wrong guy. There we go. Finally puts on a suit and becomes War Machine. We even have Howard Stark pop up on some old reels because Tony needs a dead dad and a secret to mope about. And then, just to make sure you get it, they start dropping Avengers Easter eggs everywhere. Meanwhile, in the actual movie, Tony's got his own problems that have nothing to do with the rest of the MCU. The thing that's kept him alive is also killing him. He's spiraling about dying and his dad, and all this stuff about the government trying to steal his suit. Apparently, world peace is fine until one guy owns it. Anyways, here's the real mess. Tony's own drama crashes into his new job as Marvel's glue. And those two things never really stop fighting. Here, let's talk about structure for a second, because it's easy to miss if you're just watching this as another sequel. If this was just a follow-up to Iron Man, just Iron Man 2, this would have been easy. But Tony Stark isn't just Iron Man anymore. He's MCU property now. Nobody said it aloud in 2010, but this is the movie where the universe starts gluing itself together. There will be no Avengers, no Civil War, no Endgame without this weird little pivot. Oh, and one more thing. This is the movie where the government tries to snatch Tony's suits, and Tony basically tells him to fuck off. Remember that, because 6 years later in Civil War, he's gonna be the guy begging for control. That flip doesn't come out of nowhere. It starts right here. This moment is huge. This isn't just a team-up moment with Tony and his friends. It's the first time we get to see the guy from Iron Man and Iron Man 2, the one who's been hogging the spotlight for 2 movies. We get to see if he's capable of acting as a heart of the group when he's not the one in control. And yeah, he basically nails it. Is there anyone capable of being a contrarian enough to say Iron Man was bad in the Avengers? No, come on. Throw Tony in with the rest of them for the first time and just watch who ends up being the center of the shot. Thor's a god, Cap is a roided up super soldier wearing a flag, Banner turns into a giant green monster, and somehow the guy in a tin can with 0 powers is still the loudest person here. Mostly because RDJ's Tony doesn't shut up, but that's literally what the first movie spent all its time setting up.
Take that off. What are you?
Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
But forget all the quips. The only thing that actually matters is the ending. This is the same guy who started out selling missiles and not really caring about where they landed. Now he's flying a nuke into a wormhole, alone, fully expecting to die out there. And then somehow he lives. But he gets to look at what's waiting on the other side, a full-on alien armada, the kind of threats that a guy in a suit isn't capable of handling, and that image sticks with him.
Seriously, you can draw a straight line from the Battle of New York in 2012 to the last snap in 2019.
Everything Tony does after this is basically him trying to deal with what he saw through that portal.
I'm Tony Stark. I build neat stuff. I got a great girl. And occasionally, save the world. So why can't I sleep?
Don't think of this as part 3 of a trilogy. I promise this movie works so much better if you think of it as aftermath to the Avengers or the Avengers prologue. We're back with Tony and he's unable to sleep. He hears New York and basically has a full-on panic attack. So what does he do? He builds suits. All the time. That's it. He's prepping for some big nameless threat that probably only exists in his head. The movie keeps poking at this one idea. Is Tony Stark even a person if he's not Iron Man? In the end, he destroys all the suits he's built and, for a period of time, decides to be a man with a girlfriend in a workshop rather than a superhero burdened by anxiety. So yeah, that's technically the end of the solo run. 3 movies, arms dealer, hero, guy who finally ditches the suits. Except, it's not the end.
There's only one path to peace. Their extinction.
Why though?
We've been watching Tony quietly freaking out ever since he saw the other side of that wormhole. But now he's done pretending it's just his problem. Now he's trying to fix it, out in the open, for everyone to see. He wants to, in his own words, wrap the whole planet in an Iron Man suit. Ultron is basically Tony's idea of a planet-wide robot cop squad, so nobody ever has to carry a nuke through a space portal again. It's not some cartoon villain plan, it's just Tony's trauma in a shiny metal suit pretending to be a solution. And then, surprise, it all goes sideways. Tony can't stop trying to control everything, can't stop turning his panic into tech, and can't stop fixing stuff nobody else even thinks is broken. And it's weird because we've watched his mindset work out for him for years. Normally we're cheering for it. Now his issues aren't just his problems, they're everyone's. Ultron immediately turns into a genocidal robot, and Vision crawls out from the wreckage, which is good. Bad? Both. I don't know. Sokovia gets pulled up into the sky and then slammed back down, and the Avengers are basically never the same afterwards. Remember Iron Man 2, Tony? The guy who told the government to get lost? Now he's starting to wonder if maybe, just maybe, someone else should have a say. He's not quite there yet, but Ultron makes it pretty hard to ignore. And all this mess just lines up the next disaster. And let's see how Tony deals with this one.
But he's my friend. So was I.
Okay, wait up. Civil War is a mess for Tony. There are problems everywhere and no easy answers. This is the second big turning point. All the stuff Ultron just hinted at is now blowing up in Tony's face, and he has to deal with it in front of everyone. Sokovia is still a smoking hole in the ground, and then this mom shows up and basically tells Tony, hey, you killed my kid. And she didn't say the Avengers or Iron Man did it. She pointed the finger right at Tony. And fair or not, the moment landed. That's the moment he caves and signs up for the Sokovia Accords. Government oversights, rules, all that. Because you can't just blow up a city and shrug it off. The guy we watched for all these years, I am Iron Man, that guy, he's asking the government to babysit him. What happened? Simple, he can't wash the blood off his hands anymore. This isn't about politics, it's just guilt, plain and simple. And Steve is absolutely not signing it, so now we have 2 friends who cannot agree what the line is, so boom, Civil War. That's it, that's what actually tears a team apart. Then Zemo drops his bomb, Tony finds out Bucky killed his parents while brainwashed, and Steve knew for a while, and just didn't bother to mention it. Seeing that moment on Tony's face, you see that it completely wrecked him. This isn't about the Accords or paperwork anymore. It's Tony, wrecked with grief, going after the guy tied to his parents' death.
and one of them used to be his friend. Tony's not even close to being that cocky billionaire we started with. Sure, Downey still gives him that spark, but it's not the same guy. This is where his thing with Steve just snaps, and it matters way more than it looks like at first. Steve was always the guy Tony measured himself against, the one who never messed up. But now Steve's hiding stuff too. We've seen Tony handle betrayal before, but this one hits different. That's why for me, the bunker fight hits way more than the airport one. And also this is the movie where Tony ropes in Spider-Man and Peter gets stuck into Tony's mess and ends up carrying the torch whether he likes it or not. Classic Tony. Falling apart but still drags someone else in his chaos. And also Marvel's kind of betting on him being Tony's replacement, but that's another video. Bottom line, the Avengers are already a wreck before the purple guy even shows up.
I know what it's like to lose. Feel so desperately that you're right. Yet to fail, nonetheless.
Tony's been waiting for the other shoe to drop ever since he stared into that wormhole. Well, here it is, and it's got a name. Thanos. Now, all the weird stuff Tony's done since 2012 actually makes sense. The suits, Ultron, the endless warnings everyone ignored, even the panic attacks. Turns out, he wasn't just being paranoid, he was right. And guess what? That doesn't help at all, it still sucks. And when it finally happens, he loses anyway. On Titan, he throws everything at Thanos. He gets closer than anyone else to actually stopping the guy, and it's still not enough. Then Peter Parker, the kid Tony basically drags into this mess, falls apart in his arms, scared, and Tony can't do a damn thing about it. Half the universe blinks out, and Tony's still there. And in this instance, surviving was actually the worst thing that could have happened to him.
Well, that didn't work out, did it?
I said we'd lose. You said, we'll do that together too. And guess what, Cap? We lost. And you weren't there.
Okay, before we get into Endgame, I'm just gonna make it clear that I'm staying with Tony here. There's obviously a shitload happening in this movie with Steve, Natasha, Thor, Clint, everyone else, but they'll get their turn. So if it feels like I'm skipping over a lot, I am. This is a series where I'm going character by character, and next week I'm gonna do Cap. So if you wanna see that, subscribe. All right, back to Tony. We see that he actually managed to get out, for a bit anyway. He marries Pepper, has a kid, and does the whole normal life thing. In Iron Man 3, he pretended he was doing it, but this time he actually pulls it off. And then the universe comes knocking 5 years later. Apparently, only Tony can figure out time travel. And he does. He cracks the code and jumps right back into the mess he had every right to walk away from. And then, when it's time to face Thanos and his army, it's the same guy who started out as a greedy weapons dealer in a cave who ends up snapping his own finger and wiping himself out to save everyone else. Not exactly the retirement plan he signed up for. I am Iron Man. Those exact 4 words that ended the first movie. But this time it's a completely different guy saying them. That's how Tony Stark's story ends. Obvious, deserved, and if this was just a biography, we'd be done. This isn't only about Tony. He's just one piece in a bigger story of the MCU. The interesting part isn't how Tony's story ended, but what happened to the MCU when it had to move on without him. Marvel finally had to run the whole thing without the guy who basically held it together for over a decade. And you can feel it everywhere. Peter Parker is immediately drowning in the be the next Tony pressure in Far From Home. Rhodey, not that one. Rhodey is still War Machine, carrying around Tony's tech in the giant hole he left behind. Then there's Riri Williams, Ironheart, who shows up as a genius kid building her own suit. But she's not a replacement, she's just stuck chasing Tony's ghost like everyone else. Stark Tech and Tony screw-ups keep popping up in random places, even when he has nothing to do with the plot. But here's the thing, nobody actually replaces Tony. Not just the suit, but the guy everyone else revolved around. Tony Stark didn't just fit in the MCU, he basically outgrew it. You can't just slap a new Iron Man in and call it a day. So what does the MCU even look like when the main pillars are gone? That's what we're about to find out, because I don't even think Marvel knew. Tony Stark died, but Robert Downey Jr. didn't. So in 2024 at Comic-Con, Marvel finally admits what everyone's been whispering for months. Downey's back. Not as Tony Stark, no, he's Victor Von Doom now. The Fantastic Four's big bad, one of the smartest people in the world, that guy. We get the title Avengers Doomsday, and we learned that the Russo brothers are back, because apparently we can't do an Avengers movie without them. We get the release date of December 18, 2026, and a cast that's basically everyone. Old Avengers, new heroes, and why not throw in Fox's X-Men actors like Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen as well. Depending on how you look at it, this is either genius or a total mess. So what happens when the MCU's golden boy comes back as the biggest villain? Everything's up for grabs. Is Doom the new main character now? Or is Downey just here to make the hero-villain thing even more confusing? There's just so many different ways they can go with this. Either way, Marvel has set off arguments that will basically never end until the movie actually comes out.
What the hell is even that?
So let's forget about trying to predict Doom's backstory or whatever plot twist they'll throw in. The real chaos is just the casting. That's the headline. Marvel spent over a decade turning Downey into the face of the whole thing. They actually gave Tony Stark a real ending. Not a fake out, not a cheap death, he earned that damn thing. They acted like he was gone for good. Years of pretending, and now surprise, Downey's back. Whatever the story ends up being, this is already nuts from a pop culture angle. Marvel made Tony Stark a superstar, and now Downey's basically glued to Iron Man forever. So they had to drag him back for another team up, even if they was wearing a different mask. Tony Stark's got bigger than Iron Man. Downey got bigger than Tony Stark's. So big that without him, it feels like we're missing our main character. And this isn't just an MCU thing. The whole genre is feeling his absence. Suddenly everyone has superhero fatigue. In reality, it just doesn't feel the same without him. That's it. The movies between Endgame and Doomsday definitely prove that. And now we're back to where we started. Sort of. Remember, all this started with the B-list hero in a studio betting the farm on a guy nobody would even insure. Almost 20 years later, Tony Stark has been dead in universe for 7 years, and we're still getting another Avengers movie, and Downey is such a big deal that just seeing his face is a huge moment. At some point, Marvel stopped needing Iron Man or Tony Stark. They just needed Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man was never meant to be the main event. He was a safe bet because nobody cared if he failed. But the gamble paid off so much that it rewired Hollywood. Marvel hired the guy nobody wanted to play the hero nobody cared about in a movie they couldn't afford to mess up. And instead of just making a hero, they made a star who blew past everything, even his own ending. That's the Tony Stark story. And it's still not done. December 18th, we find out what's next. Tony was never supposed to be the entire plan. Marvel wasn't gambling on one character carrying everything forever. Iron Man was the first piece of a much bigger bet. Hulk, Thor, Captain America, the Avengers, any of them could have been the center. Tony was just first. The movie caught fire, Downey became the face of the franchise, and before Marvel really knew what was happening, the entire universe just started building itself around him. The universe was never only his. So now I want to cover the rest of it, one character at a time. Who they were when Marvel found them, what the MCU turned them into, and what's left of them heading into Doomsday. Next is Captain America, the guy who used to be MCU's moral compass and now barely gets screen time. We covered the guy Marvel couldn't replace, now let's talk about the guy they actually tried to. We'll get to that next week, but for now, who knows?
Are you Tony's stank?